My name is Mercer White. I spent my summer working under the guidance of Professor Lisa Klein on improving the output of dye-sensitized solar cells through electrolyte and electrode alterations. So, how many of you all would say that electricity is an important part of your daily lives? You just raise your hand, let me know. Alright, I'm glad that we can all agree on that. The problem is that we are literally and figuratively running on fumes. In my lifetime, we're expected to run out of oil as well as natural gas, with coal soon to follow. So, if we want electricity to be available for future generations, then we are going to need to start investing in alternative energy sources. The sun bathes the earth in enough energy every hour to power society for an entire year. The problem is we're not very good at harnessing it. Traditional solar cells, like the one seen on the bottom left of the slide, are rather difficult to make. They require extremely high temperatures to be able to be created, over 1,000 degrees Celsius most of the time. This makes them super expensive and inaccessible to most people. Dye-sensitized solar cells, on the other hand, are a rather cheap alteration for this. You're able to make them rather easily without these super high temperature costs. Dye-sensitized solar cells are also really simple devices on top of that. Light comes down from the top and then is absorbed by the dyed titanium oxide layer. Here the light promotes an electron, which then travels through the black cord into whatever you want to power. Say a light bulb or an electronic device that you want to use, in my case a voltmeter, that I was using to analyze my cells. After that, the electron will move back through the red wire, into the counter electrode, back down into the electrolyte, and into the original semiconductor that it was absorbed by. So at this point you're probably wondering, why aren't we using these already? If they're cheaper to make and they're rather simple to understand, why aren't we using them yet? Well, they're not very efficient, so they can't compete with traditional silicon solar cells yet. So that's what I tried to work on this summer. I swapped out the graphite counter electrode for a p-type semiconductor, or a positive semiconductor. I did this because, as you know, opposites attract. So if I was to put a positive semiconductor and I already have a negative semiconductor, then the electron would have a greater desire to travel through my cell to the positive end. On top of this, I changed the electrolyte in the cell. The traditional electrolyte used in dye-sensitized solar cells is ethylene glycol, which is used to dissolve iodine. The problem is this solution evaporates rather quickly. So, by adding glycerin, a rather thick solution, I was hoping to extend the lifetime of these cells by making it harder for the solution to evaporate. Throughout the summer, and with some simple modifications, I was able to create a cell, my N cell or modified cell, whichever term you prefer, that had over 3 times the voltage of my base cell. I ended up using the graphite and copper aluminum oxide counter electrodes in unison, because they worked better together than either one did alone. With the addition of the copper aluminum oxide, or my positive semiconductor, I needed to add a non-conductive porous film. I found this out through testing. Basically, if you have a negative semiconductor and a positive semiconductor in close contact, they're going to want to trade the electrons there. So, instead of the electron traveling through the cell like I wanted, it just sort of bounced around between the 2 electrodes and didn't go through the wires to whatever I wanted to power. By adding this non-conductive porous film, I was able to get the electrons to move the way I wanted. This did have an effect on how the electrolyte worked in the cell, though. The base cell worked best with an altered electrolyte. So, by adding in the glycerin, I was able to improve its lifetime as well as its voltage. However, the film made it harder for the thicker liquid to get through, hence lowering the effect of the electrolyte. So the modified cell worked best with the original all ethylene glycol based electrolyte. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done before dye-sensitized solar cells are going to be ready for the market. However, when they are, we'll be able to start replacing your windows for dye-sensitized solar cells, allowing you to power your homes without needing solar panels on the roofs. This will be a cheaper alternative that will help humans get one step closer to stopping running on fumes.